Association of Appraisers, Quilted Textiles, American Quilt Study Group, and numerous other quilt guilds. She was accepted into the Southern Highland Craft Guild in 2000 and received the Lifetime Membership Award in 2023. In 1990, she joined the Asheville Quilt Guild, where she immediately developed a love for the art of quilt making and its rich history. Today, she remains an active member. Her presentation will use several actual quilts dating from the 1850s to the 1970s to demonstrate how she identifies quilts through pattern, style, and material. Quilts are a tangible piece of history. Clues within the quilt provide us with a glimpse of the quilt maker's life and interests, as well as what was going on in the world around them. Quilts within this presentation will illustrate cultural or regional differences and their influences on the quilts. So please help us in welcoming Connie Brown.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, so how is this? Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. All right. So as a quilt appraiser, one question I get asked over and over is, what does it take to be a quilt appraiser? Number one, you've got to know what's in front of you. Is it an antique quilt? Is it a reproduction? When was it made? If it was a newly made quilt, a contemporary quilt, is it traditional in nature or is it more in the decorative arts genre? So, and like Mike said, in 1990, that is when I began my quilt journey. And I immediately fell in love with not just making quilts, but quilt history. I had no idea that quilt blocks had a name. So just learning that was, opened a whole lot of doors for me. So today we're going to look at two distinct styles of Southern quilts. All of these but two are Southern quilts. And two of the quilts that you're going to see belong to fellow Southern Highland Craft Guild members. All right, so when we think of the South and how it was settled, you've got the East Coast and you have the Piedmont region. The Piedmont region is between the coast and the Appalachian Mountains. We're talking from Virginia through North Carolina, South Carolina, on into Georgia, and it even swings on into Alabama. That whole Piedmont region, it was primarily settled by the Swiss Germans. Then when we look at the Appalachian Mountains, who settled that? The Scotch Irish. We're talking all of West Virginia, the mountains of Virginia. We're talking the vast majority of Kentucky, the majority of Tennessee, and I dare say the whole state of Tennessee really is, could be considered Appalachian in heritage when we're talking about that time frame. So anyway, the best thing to do is just to jump right in. So this first quilt is a family quilt from my family. I have maybe 4 quilts made by my great aunt and my great grandmother. And they were Aunt Lucy and Aunt Luannie. They were sisters that married brothers, Uncle Monroe and Uncle George. And this is a perfect example of a quilt that you would find in Appalachia that has all those Scotch-Irish characteristics in it. Well, one thing that really jumps out at you, I'm sure, is the pink sashings. So often we would find sashings that are, they don't quite go with the quilt. They stand out. They're almost a design element of their own. We do have a repeat block. It is the exact same block, every one of these squares, but they're all different. They are all individual, like the Scotch Irish. They are an individual person, individual little community, clannish. They stick together. Anyway, so every block is exactly the same, except it's mutated by the choice of colors or the choice of fabrics. You can see there's a lot of prints in here. That block specifically, the prints are all the same size. You can hardly even tell. Oh my goodness. You can hardly even tell that there's any piecework in that. So this quilt dates to the 1940s. It is from the Lexington, Tennessee area, which is between Jackson and Nashville. It's hand pieced and hand quilted. Okay, you can sit it back there. No, right in the middle. Right in the middle. Lift up. There you go. And you guys can rest. Oh, and the name of that block was Double Monkey Wrench, Churn Dash Shoe Fly. Okay, Ted, point at that quilt in the middle. That quilt is a log cabin quilt. It dates to 1870. It's a little bit more sophisticated quilt. It's more refined. It's not as haphazard as what we just saw. This is typical. This is a northern quilt. It is from Pennsylvania, and it is more of what we would see in a northern quilt. It's a thinner quilt. Southern quilts were usually pretty thick. You might also find this in a coastal area, but it's definitely a Pennsylvania quilt. Now then, we're going to come exactly 100 years. That's 1870. This is also 1870. This is an example of something that you would see that would come from someone with the Swiss-German ancestry out of the Piedmont region. We have 9 large, oversized designs. We do have borders completely around it. In the Scotch-Irish quilt, we didn't have any borders. This has borders around it. It's a circular design. This quilt came out of from an antique shop near Hickory. Everything about this says North Carolina. Normally, so this block is known as the Wheel of Fortune, Circular Saw, or Rising Sun. Because the colored triangles, in my eye, the way I see it, they make a smooth circle. If they were reversed, they would make a jagged edge like a saw blade. Then I might call it circular saw. But to me, it's a smooth, and I refer to it as Wheel of Fortune. This has 24 spokes. Normally, this stuff just wants to go everywhere. These are other examples of this. In Anna's pictures in your slides, you showed, I believe it was the 1933 Crafts Fair. There was a quilt in there. It was 9 circular blocks, very similar to this. I would say that was a North Carolina quilt that was there. They probably made it to please an audience, though. It wasn't necessarily something that an Appalachian would have made to use at home. I think they made it for sale. Okay. And this is all hand-pieced. It's not applique, it's hand-pieced and hand-quilted. Next, you can see I have the brown and white blocks here. The girls will hold up a couple of more of those. As Mike said, I'm a member of the Asheville Quilt Guild, and at one of our Quilt Guild meetings, the president of the guild said, someone has sent us 8 of these big antique blocks. Anybody want them? Well, several of us shot up our hands, but I told all my friends around me, put your name in, because they don't work in antique things. And I said, put your names in and try to win them for me. Sure enough, Southern Highland member Janice Maddox won the blocks, and she promised me, she said, I'll give them to you after I do a little research. So she contacted the lady and asked where they were from, and they had been passed down in the family, which was from between Athens and the South Carolina, Georgia border near Abbeville. So they were from that area. Now then, I knew there was something familiar about these blocks. And then the North Carolina, this is the North Carolina quilt history book from the documentation days. And I remembered this quilt in there. And so I got to looking and doing a little research. And this block has never really had an official name. It's just been known as the unknown or unnamed medallion applique. Well, so these blocks, and I have 8 of them because 9 makes a quilt. These blocks are a combination of machine and hand applique, and they do date to about 1880. So that's a little unusual to see some machine applique. So this person, not only did they have access to the machine, but they could have lived near a mill. It raised all sorts of questions. Okay, I'll let you guys put those away.
When you make a medallion panel like this, block like this, are the edges turned in or is it just cut?
These are turned edge, and there's several ways you can do it. So not long, a couple of months after I got the brown blocks, the president of the Quilt Guild called me and she said, hey, at the Habitat silent auction, they've got a quilt that I think it's like those brown and white blocks. Well, I was over there. This was the quilt. And so now I have 2, and I'm really starting to research this. And after the North Carolina State project, Jan Murphy had noted that there were several of these, and nobody knew what they were. And so she documented 31 of these examples of this, with 12 being from North Carolina, 16 from South Carolina, always the Piedmont region. 16 from South Carolina, 1 from Missouri, 1 from Texas, and 1 up in Canada. But anyway, since that time, with the addition of the last one that you're going to see today, I have found 39 more of them. Almost all of them date back to being made in North Carolina, South Carolina, or the family member, the mother, the grandmother, somebody was from North Carolina, South Carolina. That's of those that date to the 1880s, 1870s to 1890s is the peak of them. This quilt is a little earlier. It's about 1870. It's all handwork. It's all hand-pieced, hand applique, hand quilted. What is unique about it, and the way I date it, is by the fabric. It's not a red polka dot. That was a red fabric with a black and white print. The black has rotted out and dropped out. So it kind of looks modern being polka dot, but it's not. And the way we identify these, there are either 8 lobes or 6 lobes. They have either serrated sides or smooth side, serrated top or smooth top, 1 slit or 2 slits, and are the slits serrated, or is it something else instead of a slit? Okay, and the center, sometimes this one is just serrated, sometimes they may have a star in there or whatever, but that's how we identify them, okay? And then you guys can rest your arms. So the next 4 quilts, no, actually we have in the middle behind me, not long after I got the red and white one, my friend Georgia Bonestill, who is also a member of Southern Highland Craft Guild, called me one Saturday morning and she said, there's a lady in Union, South Carolina, that has this quilt, and I think it's like those brown and white blocks. Do you want to talk to her? Yeah. So I met with her, but when I talked to her on the phone, she wanted an appraisal on it. And I said, well, what is your goal with the quilt? She says, well, I want to sell it. It's just been passed down through the family, and it's not my family, and so I want to sell it. And I said, well, I won't be able to give you an appraisal because more than likely I'm going to be interested in purchasing it, and that would be a conflict of interest. So I said, but let's get together and let me tell you what you have first and make sure of what you have. And so we got together, and as you can see, it's pretty much like those blocks. So I said, where did the quilt come from? And she said, it either is from my family that was here in Union, South Carolina, or from my family that was from Abbeville. So I'm like, okay. And it is all hand applique, but you need to be sure you check it out. It is all machine quilted. It does date to 1880. So now we've got a little bit of an unusual animal here. You know, why did they go to the trouble to hand applique, but then they machine quilted it? They had access, obviously, to a really good machine, but it's not quilted in the fashion that you think of today. It's in sections. So they quilted each block individually and some of the sashing, and then all of it was, all 9 pieces were then sewn together by hand. So yeah, so be sure and check. And if you'll notice, the red one also, they're pretty much quilted the same as far as they echo the pattern. It was just the style, it was the fashion. And how did this pattern get disseminated through the Piedmont region? Probably up and down the mill trail. Where there was a mill, it went from one mill to the other. Anyway, okay? So the next 4 quilts that we're going to look at on the table are all from the Dutch Fork area. The Dutch Fork is where the Saluda River and the Broad River fork together in Lexington County near Newberry, South Carolina. These quilts specifically are from Prosperity. Okay? This first one, once again, we have some large circular thing going on here. What are those? Are they rosebuds? Are they canoes? Are they Indian corn? It's kind of hard to tell. It's kind of chunky looking, but it's very unique and different. Now then, what you see that looks like, well, it is a sashing, is a tiny, tiny handmade piping. So this quilt dates to about 1870, and several other historians have also looked at this quilt. We're just not sure. I think they're rosebuds, but it's very organized, like the Swiss Germans, like they had an organized society, and they brought that with them to the U.S., and it's very organized. All of the reds are in the same position. It looks planned, as opposed to the Scotch-Irish that looks haphazard. We do have borders on here, but the borders, instead of doing a nice mitered border, they're just kind of chopped off, but that's fine, it works. This tan border was a red at one time. It was a synthetic dye, and when it lost its color, it just turns out to this pinkish, tannish color. And so that's one way we can date it too. And also the green print, those little prints do date to about 1870, 1875. Okay?
Is that the same fabric red that was on the other quilt?
No. No, but it could be in the next ones. Huh? You can tell. You've looked at enough quilts, I can tell it was red and not green. I can just tell. And it's a pinkish cast to it. But you'll see more. This quilt, now this is part of the 4 from that family. So this next quilt, this is an example of turkey red. It was a stable red that held its color, but it does, this one is a little bit earlier. I would say it dates, wait, let me see here, 1860s. And the green has more of a bluish cast now. It looks teal. And the cheddar is very vivid. These are colors that you would expect to see in the from the Pennsylvania Dutch and in the Swiss Germans. Now then, in the South Carolina and North Carolina quilt documentation days, the tulip flower shows up more than any other flower in quilts. This particular one is all hand pieced. It's hand quilted. And what else do I need to tell you about it? Oh, the flowers that we see in these southern quilts are chunky. They're not as graceful as what you would expect to find in the Baltimore album quilts and the quilts from up north. They just are a little different. They're in your face, they're there, okay? And this quilt is big. It's one of the biggest ones, and it's one of the oldest quilts I have, and it's one of the biggest. That's because anyway, the size of the beds and where it was. And so the next quilt is from that family. It is an album quilt. And if you notice, it's got borders all the way around it like the other two did. You see some different colors, some faded fabrics in there that were probably greens and reds. You know that leaves and vines were more than likely green. The grapes on the bottom one it was probably red berries, not grapes. You will also see two of the Carolina medallions in the upper corner and then down here in the bottom. And what's going on with this one right down here? It has hearts instead of slits. Let's get this because I want to make sure that the Galloways see this block. So hold it up right here. Yeah. So see that one? Okay. All right, it's got hearts instead of slits. So these medallion quilts were made like you would make a snowflake. You fold a paper snowflake. You fold the paper and then you cut them out. Well, you know, when you cut a slit and you think and you folded it and you cut and you think you're gonna have a nice curve, what do you get? You kind of get and then you cut a little bit more and before you know it, then you've got something that looks like a bent hot dog. Let's just go ahead and make it a heart. Okay, I don't know, but that's just my thoughts on that. This quilt does have one, let's show the others, yeah. Right, the one in the middle with the green and brown spikes, there is one copper plate stamp in there with a name. It is not a name that was part of the family. I knew that this family, I know Evelyn very well. I knew they all attended St. Luke's Church there in Prosperity. And so the name that's in there is Melissa Schubert. Well, Melissa got married in 1878 to W.A. Mosley. W.A. Mosley and his brother owned W.A. Mosley Mercantile there in Prosperity. She would have had the means to get a new copper plate. Therefore, I date this prior to her getting married. I think it's 1870 to 1878. And everything about the quilt, you know, holds up to that date, okay? And this is the next quilt is the last of that family, of those family quilts. There was 4 of them. It has a different style to it. It is a repeat block, but every block is different. It's organized. The sashings are a print that's a little red and white pink print, but it has just a different style about it. I do know that one of the, in the family tree, one of the ladies married a gentleman from Charleston. I believe this quilt traveled with him from Charleston and became part of the family quilts, okay? Oh, and that block's known as basket weave. All right, so before we leave the Dutch fork area and well, we're going to see more, but so over on the side here, you see this brown and blue quilt. This Bob Galloway, who is a member of Southern Highland Craft Guild, this was his family quilt, or one of, I think they have two or three. Anyway, we've met over the past few months, and he told me, he said, I've got some quilts. And anyway, I said, yeah, I'd love to look at them. And we met here in this room in January, not too long ago. And as Barbara was taking the quilt out of its bag, I could just feel my eyes going like this. I knew what it was before they even laid it out. And I said, don't tell me, let me tell you what I see first in the quilt. And so the first thing that I told him was, it's going to date to about 1880, 1890. I think this is from the Piedmont region. And anyway, I said, now, where's your family from? And he said, the Piedmont. And I was like, North Carolina South? No, Piedmont, South Carolina. Well, I had no idea there was a town named Piedmont, South Carolina. One of the largest textile mills, and I've done a little research since then, and from, I guess, it opened in 1873 is when the building was, Piedmont 1 was being built, but until the 1900, it was the largest fabric producer in the U.S., and they exported a large majority of their fabric to where? China. Can you believe that? In 1890s, I'm like, oh my gosh. So, but anyway, and I said to Bob, I said, and this family, she had means to get this fabric. Either they had money to buy the fabric, because I felt like the fabric was bought specifically to make this quilt. So they had the means to either purchase the fabric, maybe they had a store, they had access to it. They weren't so rural that they had to just put bits and pieces and use a little bit of this one and a little bit of that red and make a mismatch. But so Bob said that, yeah, some of this holds up, but he thinks then that his great-grandmother made the quilt, and then his grandfather was the manager of the company store there at Piedmont. But I think this probably dates grandfather just a little bit. So maybe great-grandfather also was the manager of the store. You'll notice it has the hearts in it like mine. So where is Piedmont, South Carolina? It's on the Saluda River. What is due south of there almost? Prosperity. Anyway, so we have a little bit of connection there. And this is all going to slide. So this is South Carolina, and all of my quilts that you've seen that have the Carolina medallion in it are basically from this general area, with Athens being here. So if the blocks came from Athens, Athens is over here. The red and white one, the one from Iredell County, is just up from Union. So I thought, oh man, that is just such a connection. Okay. Okay, so this next quilt, we're going into applique business now, and floral applique. We've got, once again, 9 large blocks, oversized. What the heck kind of flower are these? We know we figured out what they're not. They're not thistle. It's not a cotton bloom. It's not a tobacco bloom. It's not a rose, but I do know by the thread that is left in there, this was pink. I don't mean pink, red. It is sort of that pinkish beige that I was talking about. These were green. The one that looks more tannish was green. There is this one block in the corner that has yellow leaves, I don't know what they would have been. I haven't figured that out. This block that has the blue, the teal, that was actually a little bit earlier fabric. It was a two-step green process. They would have had that color fabric. They would have added yellow to it and made a green, and it's just lost its color. This quilt, as are several of my quilts, are in rough condition, but they are excellent study pieces and ways for us to learn. And because of this, there is right in the middle there is some seams that we can really get in there and look, and you can still see some of that original color. Okay, and if you'll notice, it does have borders, but they're not completely the same. It's a real hodgepodge and kind of, it's big. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't even tell you. 1880 to 1890, and I'm dating it because of the loss of the color to the fabrics. No, it's not earlier because the synthetic dyes. I know it because of the way it's faded too. No. No, but I mean, maybe, but that's, I don't know. Nothing that I've ever heard related to quilts, no, to our fabrics that we're looking at. If it, was it dyed at home? I don't think these were dyed at home. These were commercial, they were commercial. Yeah. So the next quilt, this block is known as Carolina Lily, Peony, or double tulip. It is all handwork, hand applique, hand pieced, and hand quilted. These colors are stable. So, and it's going to date about the same time frame as that other one. But because these are stable fabrics and the style of this is more sophisticated looking. This quilt was purchased at an antique store just outside of Nashville. This is what you would expect to find from that time period in Nashville. If you'll notice the quilting, you can see the feathered wreaths in there throughout middle to eastern Tennessee, going down towards Tullahoma, into Ray County. That was a real hot spot of elegant quilting. And this holds up to all of that. So, you know, knowing where I got it from, yes, I agree. I agree. I don't know a family or anything that goes with it. But anyway, all right, the next one. Oh, it's all hand quilted. It's all handwork and all hand sewn. And the next quilt dates to 1920. This is what is known as 4 T's. So it's 4 of the letter T's put together makes the block. This quilt came from a little antique store just out Leicester Highway, a little piece that has since closed up. The lady got everything from out in Leicester. This quilt, even though the block is the same from block to block, the sashings are, there's something a little unusual there about the sashings. Do they overpower or are they part of the background? Which is it? I'm not real sure there. The borders, they are different. 2 sides have the same borders, and then the top and the bottom are different. It is quilted in what we call Baptist fans or Methodist fans, depending on whichever one you were, and but it's just concentric fans, and it runs across the quilt with no regard to what the design is, to the blocks. It doesn't follow the blocks. And what else can I tell you about this one? Oh, the letter T. The Women's Christian Temperance Movement, the letter T was their logo. Could this have been a lady making a statement in favor of that. I have no way of knowing. I wasn't there. And she didn't leave me a note. Sometimes they do. So, no, but sometimes there is. I have no way of knowing, but it could be that maybe she just had a good-looking husband named Ted and liked the letter T. But anyway, okay, that's that one.
There's a little discrepancy on that left side where that one doesn't eat up. Would that have been on purpose?
I think that's her Scotch-Irish heritage saying, it's okay, it's done. You know, it's just, it is what it is. And it's gonna fit in her cabin the way it, because the bed may have been shoved against the wall in that corner's ought never seen, and or had a foot, who knows? But, borders just not being the same is so Southern and so Appalachian, you know. So hang on, you guys rest a minute. So in the Southern Highland Archives, there is information about the mountain cabin quilters. And the mountain cabin quilters were in existence probably from the late 1920s to just after World War II. And anyway, if you went in the Allen Stand shop in downtown Asheville and you were looking for a quilt, they had this pamphlet about them. They were located in Cashiers and they were a co-op. And it tells some of the patterns that they made. Now then, the shop manager would have had pictures of all the different quilts that they made. I have never, in all of my 34 years of living here in Asheville and studying quilts, I have never, and I've traveled all over the Southeast looking at quilts. I've never run into one of these anywhere. But, so this particular design, this is at a little larger. Okay, y'all can hold that one up. So I found this in Memphis, and I thought, could this be one? I don't know, but it was cheap enough, and this was green fabric. You can see how all of the deterioration where it has just eaten and gone away. There are some people that would have said, well, that was dyed with walnut. No, it was dyed with, it was green because it has green thread behind there. And they would have used brown if it was walnut, and walnut would have made brown. But this quilt was red, white, and green originally. But I brought it home and I started looking at it and comparing it to the pictures. No, there's no way this would have been one of those quilts, a Southern Highland quilt. Number one, we've got the Baptist fans. They run completely across the design. They would not have done that in a custom-made quilt. The quilting would have followed the design and all of those triangles, and it would have had a different type of quilting in it. Also, the borders. You've got two borders on one side, none on the other. So it was made to fit this person's bed, okay? And this quilt, this block in the Southern Highland stuff, the block is known, the design is known as pine burr. It is also known as the Mayflower quilt. Either name is correct. Pine burr. Mm-hmm. And there are two pine burrs blocks. There's also another one that is the state quilt block of Alabama, which is a different type of pine burr. And that's pretty true of almost all quilt names. There's 2 or 3 different names and designs for some blocks. Oh, that was a hanging sleeve. I hung it as a display. Yeah, no. Okay, you can show this one. So this quilt dates to about 1940, 1945. I got this at, just as you go down 26 and you're headed to South Carolina, that first exit, I think it's Landrum, where the big Ingles is, across the street from the Ingles where you get the cheap gas. There's that little thrift store across the street. So this came out of that thrift store. So I was in there looking one day, and I'm trying to see here and here. Anyway, I could see the writing, and I'm like, and it's reverse because it was turned to the inside. Well, I'm sure most of you know about feed sacks, feed bags. They came in a printed thing that ladies would buy the fabric and open it up to make a dress, a skirt, curtains, whatever. You also had logo feed sacks that could have been for horse feed or mule feed or chicken scratch or whatever, hog feed. So I could see the writing, and I wanted to know what the writing said because it's a lot of writing. Well, it's 6 different bags. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And they are actually commodity sacks. So part of Roosevelt's 1933 New Deal policy, under the Agricultural Adjustment Act, the Commodity Credit Corporation, a way to subsidize farmers was to give allotments to the farmers as to how much they could get cash for from the government. Okay, so those commodities were corn, wheat, cotton, rice, peanuts, tobacco, and milk. Milk did not come in these bags. Tobacco wasn't sold back to the government in these bags either. Could it have been peanuts? Maybe. Could it have been rice? Maybe if they were from the low country, but I'm thinking this is still more from that North Carolina, South Carolina line just down the road. Cotton, probably. Wheat, maybe. Corn, maybe. But anyway, once I knew what it was, it raised more questions. I'm like, what family could give up 6 bags of cash? You know, did they need the a quilt more for warmth than they needed the cash? I don't know. Or were the crops so poor that year that they didn't have enough to fill their allotment? Because I think they were supposed to still turn them in even if they didn't make their allotment. Anyway, so that's that. The next quilt is an excellent example of an Appalachian quilt. We have a repeat block over and over. It is the exact same block, but every one of them looks very different. Sometimes you can see them, sometimes you can't see them. The sashings overpowered, they're proportionally, they're all different. Borders, are there any? There's no. It's a real haphazard, but this is the type of quilt that I love. Let's rest your arms and show from here. I think especially that corner, yeah. I think you can see the quilting on this. It's quite daring. Some of it is in black thread. Wow. And instead of it being the fans, they're elbows. They're just squared off. It's a big stitch. Why is it a big stitch? And these girls, I'm sure, are screaming, why is this quilt so dang heavy? Yeah, lay it back down. It's because there's another quilt in there. And we see that across the U.S., but a lot in the South. And they would use another quilt in there. I have seen burlap bags layered in there. I have seen curtains used as batting. I have seen swimsuits used as batting. Somebody that lived near the Janston swimwear mill plant, yeah, they brought home the scraps and yeah. So think about that. Ted, the light colored quilt right there, that one. So that quilt that Ted's showing you is the oldest quilt in my collection. It dates to 1850. It was once inside a quilt. Why would they use, anyway, I had a friend that, anyway, the quilt was tied. She wanted to quilt the top in a more traditional means, and she started taking it apart, and she said, "There's this ugly quilt in here. Do you want it?" Yes, I want it. And there is a little tag on the bottom down there that shows one of the ties that was holding the layers together. So why would they do that? Why would they put that inside the quilt? It was probably out of fashion. Just like the magazines today tell us, you know, Southern Living, Architectural Digest, all of those things kind of tell us how we're supposed to decorate our homes. The magazines back then told them it was just out of style. This did also come from Pennsylvania. So both of those quilts are northern quilts. They're both very thin compared to our southern quilts, right? Okay, and you can move that one back. And while they're moving, I will talk and say that we're coming all the way back up. We're 1970s. 1968 to 1979 were the 11 years that polyester double knits were made. When you see a polyester double knit fabric, you know when it was made. Only 11 years, folks, and it seemed like a lifetime. The magazines at the time told women, it's okay to mix these different materials together. You can use a synthetic velvet, a crushed velvet, a denim, a double knit, a piece of sheeting, because that's what the back of this quilt is, and all of those different things. This quilt literally glows. I know from up there, it looks gorgeous, doesn't it? Yeah. But when you get up close, you'll see all the problems that she had putting it together. It's just when you've got that many different thicknesses, they don't match up. Okay, I'll let y'all move it back. That quilt, that star, is known as Star of the East, North Star, Divided Star, Louisiana Star. The quilt came from South Carolina, from the big flea market down there. It dates to 1970, and it has those synthetic velvets, polyester double knits, rayons, flannels, a little bit of everything. Okay, this one. Be sure and model the back also of this one. So this is my favorite polyester double knit quilt. It is two-sided. Yeah. And it's really only two fabrics. So it's truly, a quilt is normally 3 layers, and it's only 2 layers. It is all put together on the machine. I do not know what the stitch is. I have showed this to so many people, but I need to find somebody that is experienced in commercial machines and help me, because I do think that it was done on a commercial machine of some sort. And yeah, I love that quilt. And now then, I will say this, because it has those 11 years that polyester double knits were made, the first 4 years they were unstable. They were susceptible to gas fading as well as peeling, the little balls that you get on there. This one is the good stuff. So I'm gonna date this the latter half of 1970s, you know? Okay. I'm sorry? No, no batting. I'll let you push that book to me. So the red, white, and blue quilt over there is the most famous quilt that I own. It dates to, I want to make sure I tell you correctly, even though I know. It dates to 1890. It is from Kentucky. This quilt was once owned by Phyllis George Brown, former Miss America, former First Lady of Kentucky. Phyllis George Brown was one of the founders of the Kentucky Arts and Crafts Foundation, I believe is the name of it. She collected many, many Kentucky quilts as well as Kentucky folk art. And when she downsized, Brock Auction here in Asheville handled that sale, and that is where that quilt came from. Phyllis wrote, I think, at least 3 books on quilting, decorating with quilts. This is hard to do with the gloves. And this is her under that quilt. And last but not least is a quilt that I made. This is color cascade. I love working in scraps, but it is very organized. It's a little bit of chaos going on there, but it's organized and planned. It does have 680 different fabrics in it. Not a true charm quilt because it would have no repeats, but it does have repeats. Anyway, thank you. Oh, no, we're not done. We're not done. This came today. So girls, we're going to open this quilt. So Southern Highland member Jim Gentry, we have talked over the years, and he has this felt quilt that came from the family. And this is the first that I'm going to see of this completely opened up. And anyway, he just wanted to know if the information that he has about the quilt, if that's the true, if that's what goes with it. It is a wig rose. Let me back up. Bob's quilt over here with the triple sashing in it. When you see the triple sashing in there, you know it is a Southern quilt. Well, we got over here, we got some triple sashing. It's a wig rose. We have borders on, really just on two sides match and the other 2 match. So the green areas is quilted with green thread. So that's very planned. The red area is quilted with a red thread, so that's planned also. The quilting enhances the design. It's not just, it doesn't just run across. It is a design. These are they feathers? They're like a feather. They're like a flower, though, aren't they? They're like a pineapple. The only printed fabric that I'm seeing is the pink in there. So that's what we've got today, other than other things too. As far as a print, that's the only print that I have to work with. Everything about it. Yeah, I would say it's 1860, 1870, just what you know they had said. It's wig rose, and it's Southern. And I would say, I don't know, but some guesses of places. If I was guessing where it was from, Nashville, Knoxville, Atlanta, Charlotte. Those would be my first places. So I don't know if that checks out with any of the family stuff or not. I do think it's more of an urban area, not rural folks. So, but it's nice. Okay, we'll talk more later. Anyway, do y'all have any questions about it? And I'll answer questions, about Jim's quilt.
Well, I just have a general.
Okay.
Appraisal questions. Is date the most important factor?
Condition.
The oldest or the older
Condition.
And then hand work versus doesn't matter. Complexity of the quilting.
Yes. Overall complexity. especially when it comes to a newer made quilt, a newly, you know, like if I made something. The more complex it is, generally the more expensive that it's going to sell for.
And are there eras in quilt making where you see a difference between post-World War II quilts in that era and maybe before then? Because I'm assuming the war impacted people.
Oh, yes, yes. Well, and talking about these synthetic dyes, yes, World War I was our first war that really impacted those dyes, because we were in the late 1880s, we weren't getting those chemicals from Germany. And all of these are, you know, fall under the pharmaceuticals, all the dyes did, you know, that these commercial manufacturers were using. They had to revert back in the late, I think it was 1916 when America's first color chart came out. I have it at home, copy of it. And it was all muted, earthy colors because they went back to using the natural materials, but they weren't stable. That is why, what color are Carhartt? When you think of Carhartt jeans and Carhartt jackets, what color is Carhartt? Tan? Brown? That's why. Before that, they were blue, just like blue jeans. And they were made in Georgia, and it's from that plant that produces the brown. I can't think of the name of it. But anyway, yes, so all the different wars, yes, affected what was being made, especially World War II too, also.
You have quilts in your family, but you're not a quilt maker yourself. Where do you reach out? I mean, like if I want to learn more about my great-grandmother's quilts, we've got a lot of them.
Contact somebody like me. Or there's tons of Facebook groups. On Facebook, one in general is Vintage and Antique Quilts, I believe is the name of it. And you'll learn a lot there, trust me. Quilt History South is also another group, but we're not adding new content to that page because we've just blown it out. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So use search bars. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Sorry, you guys.
No, you're perfect.